Happy morning, students. Welcome to RGR Academy. This is biology session. After a small gap, it's a chance for us to meet once again. So in this biology session, so I welcome you back to this session. This is biology, and we'll start with a continuation of the previous chapter, that is sexual reproduction in flowering plants. All right. So I hope you're all safe and sound at home, and also doing all essential and basic practices at home, and making use of this lockdown period at home, and making all necessary practice. So without any delay, we'll start with today's session. And for your kind information, we have almost completed most of the chapters. We are about to complete other 5 to 6 chapters, right? Like that, we have continuation of sexual reproduction flowering plants. This is one important chapter. Next, we'll discuss about the reproductive health, human reproduction. Then at last, we move on to the genetics part, that is molecular basis of inheritance, and the traditional genetics, the classical genetics, that the modern genetics, with all these parts that we're going to discuss. And by that, we'll come to the end of this part, right? So today, let us begin with the continuation of the sexual reproduction in flowering plants. So thank you so much. So good morning everyone. Right. So welcome you back. Yeah, welcome you. I welcome you back. Yeah. So shall we start? Yes. So we begin with this today's part, the sexual reproduction in flowering plants. Okay. So before we start, let us have the quick recap of what are the things that we discussed before, right? The first part of the sexual reproduction in flowering plants, we discussed the basic introduction, and I hope you can recollect in 11th grade itself. We discussed about the morphology of the flowering plants. We discussed about the structure of the flower, angiosperms, that the angiosperm, gymnosperms, all these things we discussed. When we talk about the typical flower, we discussed about the calyx, corolla, gynoecium, androecium. So these are all the parts that we discussed. Based on this, when the flowers which consist of all the 4 walls, we call it as complete flower. If any one of these walls seems to be missing, then we call that as an incomplete flower, right? So calyx, corolla, that we call it as sepals, petals, we will discuss about tepals, right? And perianth. These are all the important the concepts that we discussed. Along with that, we discussed about aestivation, placentation, a symmetry part of the flower. So these are some of the important areas, right, that we already covered. So this is for your just a quick recap, because this is the second part that we're going to discuss today, that is sexual reproduction in flowering plants. So just to add the quick, because we had in between, we had a gap, right? So you might have forgotten things, so I just helping you to recap what are the things that we discussed in the previous part. So for the previous part, if you take the first part, the sexual reproduction, that we already completed, guys. So we have completed the male gametophyte, female gametophyte. We discussed about the process of microsporogenesis, megasporogenesis. In the microsporogenesis, we discussed the structure of the anther. Like inside, you could see the 4 microsporangium, right? The layers which you could see in the microsporangium, where epidermal layer, the middle layer, the tapetum, the functions of tapetum, endothelium. These are some of the areas that we covered already in the microsporogenesis. And megasporogenesis. Come to megasporogenesis. Again, we discussed about the process where the female gametophyte, how the female gametophyte is getting produced, where we discussed out of 4 megaspores, that is which is produced, right, out of which 3 which is getting degenerated, and only 1 seems to be the functional one. But this is not the case with microsporogenesis. In microsporogenesis, where all the 4 microspores or pollen grains or male gametophyte which has been produced, right, out of it, which seems to be all are functional, but that is not the case with the megasporogenesis. So this difference that you should always should be extra cautious between the microsporogenesis and megasporogenesis. And we discussed about the pollen grain structure. When come to the pollen grain structure, that is exine, intine, right? The sporopollenin, the function of the sporopollenin, and germ pore of the formation of elongation of pollen tube, callus formation, what is the function of callus, plug, and vegetative cell and generative cell, right? So two cell stage, three cell stage. These are some of the areas, right, that we discussed when we discussed about the pollen grains. And also we discussed about the pollen pistil interaction. So how the pollen pistil interaction takes place, where how the male gamete and the female gamete meets, right? How the fertilization process takes place. As we know already, like the reproduction, which is being broadly classified into three stages. One is fertilization, pre-fertilization, fertilization, and post-fertilization. This is actually the basic concept of any that reproduction that we're talking about, especially when a sexual reproduction is concerned. So this is what actually the things that we discussed already. We already completed the first part of the sexual reproduction in flowering plants. All right. So with that, we move on to the next part. So the next today's 2 hour session. The first part, the first 1 hour, we try to complete almost about the second part of the sexual reproduction in flowering plants. And we try to complete this particular chapter. And at last, we try to have recap of certain questions like that I can even ask you, so you can even answer for that type of questions. All right. So without any delay, we'll start with the today's chapter, that is sexual reproduction in flowering plants. Okay, we'll start with this one. Now we'll start with pollination. So we'll start with the pollination. Okay, fine. Coming to the pollination. Yeah, exactly. The sporopollenin, which is the tough substance that you commented, Sagadevan, is a tough substance. As of now, there's no enzymes which has been identified, which has the ability to even destroy or digest this particular the tough substance where the enzyme is made up of, that is sporopollenin. All right. So whatever the doubts which you might be having, the last 10 minutes, exclusively, I'll be giving it for you, so you can ask any doubts. And guys, what are the chapters that we're going to discuss hereafter? These are going to be the very important chapters, because we have human reproduction is going to come next, and then we have genetics. These two chapters with the weightages seems to be more, and give more importance for these two chapters. After the completion of the sexual reproduction flowering plants, we go with the reproductive health, then the human reproduction, and at last we complete with the genetics. Okay, so pay extra caution for these chapters. So we move to the continuation of this one. Okay, so pollination. Coming to pollination, so this is not the new thing for you, right? As far as pollination is concerned, what is pollination? Pollination is the transfer of the pollen grains to the stigma of pistil. So here the spelling mistake is STLE, pistil. So pistil as is termed as a pollination, they used to the external agents to achieve this pollination. It means the transfer of the pollen grain, that is the male gametes, we call it as a microspore. What is the other name for male gametes? We call it as a microspore, or male gametophytes, we call it as, right? So this transfer of this pollen grains towards the female part, right? This to the stigma, right? It may be the same flower, it may be the different flower, or maybe different plants as well, right? We very shortly we're going to discuss about autogamy, gatonogamy, xenogamy. Simply we classify pollination into self-pollination and cross-pollination. So we'll discuss about this one. So coming to the pollination. So pollination, this occurs this is a stage before the fertilization. So the pollination can be classified into the self-pollination and cross-pollination. So coming to the self-pollination, cross-pollination, cross-pollination. The self-pollination can be again subclassified into autogamy and gatonogamy. Autogamy and gatonogamy. What is autogamy? The marriage between the same flower actually. So this we call it as autogamy. Autogamy, same flower. What is gatonogamy? Gatonogamy, it's the neighbors, the marriage which occurs between the neighbors. This we call it as a gatonogamy, different flower of same plant. So this area, you should be very careful. We must know the difference between the autogamy and gatonogamy. Autogamy, where the pollination which occurs, the plant is same, flower is also same. But in gatonogamy, where you could see the flowers are different, but both the flowers are present in the same plant. So this we call it as gatonogamy. Coming to the next part, where you could see the xenogamy. Xenogamy, where we call it as cross-pollination. where the plants also might be the different, but must be of a same species. It must be of the same species. If hibiscus means other plant also must be the hibiscus. Rosa sinensis means other plant also must be the Rosa sinensis. So when you come to cross pollination, xenogamy, we have abiotic factors and the biotic factors. Coming to abiotic factors, where you could see the wind pollination, we call it as, what is the other name for wind pollination? Anemophily. Anemophily. And abiotic factors, where you could see hydrophily. Hydrophily, hydro means water, water pollination. Okay, so then come to the biotic factors, where the biotic agents which plays a very important role, where it may be by means of insects, it may be by means of bats, sometimes the bats also which performs pollination, then by snails or by means of birds. Guys, sometimes you get a questions like, so what is the type of pollination which occurs by means of insect, by means of a bat, or by means of a snail, or by means of a bird? They ask for the particular term, where by insects, we call it as entomophily. You must recollect the terms where the pollination which occurs by means of insects, we call it as entomophily. By bats, we call it as chiroterophily. Remember, recollect this term. Chiro, this is very important. You would have seen, like, previous question paper. Repeatedly, they ask this question. The pollination which occurs by means of bats, we call it as chiroterophily. Chiroterophily. Okay, fine. And by means of snails, we call it as malacophily. We call it as a malacophily by means of the snails. Birds we call it as ornithophily. So this is the terminologies that you should recollect, like that should be extra cautious. Fine. So insects, like, all the insects which comes under entomophily, the entomophily. Okay. So this comes under the biotic factors and abiotic factors, where wind pollination and water pollination. We're going to discuss the characteristic features or adaptations of the wind pollination, as well as we're going to discuss about water pollination very shortly. But here in this part, you should be very careful with the difference between autogamy and geitonogamy, and the terms where ornithophily, malacophily, chiroterophily, entomophily, the terms are very important. Okay. So now we move to the, again, examples for, like, just a broad spectrum of the pollination. We discussed already, like, self pollination and cross pollination. We discussed anemophily and hydrophily, and they're given the individual names, like, they're given the state board book, I believe, like this classification they already given in the state board book already. Okay, so where you could see in case of the beetle we call it as cantherophily. Moths, like, it will resemble same, like, the butterflies, where you could see, like, phalaenophily. And bees, the honey bees, like we call it as like melitophily. And butterflies, on the whole, like by insects, we call it as ornithophily. But more specifically, where you could see by means of butterfly, we call it as psychophily. See, these all are insects only. Beetle, moths, bees, butterflies, all these are insects. All this comes under ornithophily. But in specific, they ask about the butterfly, bee, or moth, or beetle. Then you can seek for this type of, like, answers in your options, where you could see cantherophily for beetle, moths it's phalaenophily, bees it's melitophily, and psychophily for the butterfly. And snails, I told you already, malacophily. Birds, like, ornithophily. Then you could see, like, bats it's chiroterophily. Ants it's called as myrmecophily. So these terms are, like, that you should recollect. So it will be, sometimes you get question, right? Yeah, it's entomophily. So sorry, it's by means of insects it is entomophily. By birds it is ornithophily. Okay, so on the whole, by together, if you call it as like insects, because the study of insects we call it as entomology. So entomo means insects. Together, by means of insects, you can go for entomophily. But in specific, they ask about anything in specific, like butterfly, bees, a moth, or beetle. Just search for any of these options given in the particular question. So then you can accordingly, you can select the correct answer. All right. So done with this part. These are agents of the pollination, mainly the biotic agents and abiotic agents, which comes under the cross pollination. Okay. We're done with the classification of pollination. Now we move on to the kinds of pollination. Coming to the kinds of pollination, first we'll discuss about autogamy. Autogamy means what? So we could see the pollination is achieved within the same flower and the same plant. The flower is same, plant is also same. The same flower, same plant. So this we call it as the autogamy. So the anther and stigma should lie close to each other. So there should not be like any distance between the anther and the stigma, where you could see the anther and stigma should be having a close proximity to each other so that self-pollination, that is autogamy, can occur. What is the rule? What is the minimal requirement for this? The minimal requirement for autogamy to accomplish is where anther and stigma must be in the close proximity so that assured set of like fertilization can occur in this case. So anther the male and the stigma the female should lie close to each other so that self-pollination can occur. Example for this type of autogamy, you could see viola. Sometimes they'll ask an example, right? You can take viola as an example. Viola oxalis, oxalis Comelina. So these are some of the examples. Sometimes like they ask you to identify which among the following is the autogamy. Viola, oxalis, Comelina, which produce the cleistogamous and also chasmogamous. So we might be asking what is cleistogamous and chasmogamous. Cleistogamous is the closed flower which will be closed, and chasmogamous is the open, right? Where the cleistogamous which will not bloom, always it will be in closed mode where there will be assured set of fertilization because anther and stigma which is already present inside. So assured fertilization, autogamy for sure that is going to take place in cleistogamous. Cleistogamous means closed flower. Chasmogamous is a open flower. So where you could see both the cases where this could see the cleistogamous as well as the chasmogamous. So in this the image that you could see in this case where the chasmogamous flower that you could see, this is the open flower you could see. Open flower above the ground, you could see the flower is start blooming, right? It's open now, right? This is the chasmogamous flower where cleistogamous flower, it's underground flower where it's underground where you could see like then the flower is not blooming. Actually, it's always in a closed fashion where you could see anther and stigma which is present inside the flower. So there's no need of like any external agents to transfer because this flower anyway it's not going to open, this cleistogamous flower. So it's always will be in the closed mode. So where you could see the seed pod where it is underground after the autogamy. After the autogamy, the seed pod which started forming actually. So these are the types of the kinds of pollination. The first one we discussed about autogamy. So often you could see in the textbooks are given the viola, oxalis, Comelina. So these produce the cleistogamous as well as the chasmogamous flowers. So this we done with this part. Next we move on to the next type where gatonogamy. So in definition part where you could see the gatonogamy. What is the gatonogamy? The marriage between the neighbors. It means the same plant but the flowers are different, right? Where you could see the gatonogamy, the transfer of the pollen grains from anther, the male to the female of another plant of the, this is another flower. So there's mistake here. The flower of the same plant. It is functionally cross-pollination but genetically similar to autogamy since the pollen grains come from the same plant. But what is the thing actually in gatonogamy? Plant is same where the flowers seems to be different. So the flowers are different but with both the different flowers which present in the same plant. But autogamy, same plant, same flower. Gatonogamy, where you could see different flower but it's same plant. Where xenogamy, what is a xenogamy? Transfer of pollen grains from the anther to stigma. It's a completely different flower and also the different plant, and this brings genetically different types of pollen grains. Here you could see the variations where you could see in case of cross pollination, right? So normal cases where you could see pomegranate also you can take, where you could see examples that you can take as an gatonogamy. Can you give some examples for gatonogamy? So you can give more examples for xenogamy. Can you give some examples for gatonogamy? So one among the examples that you see pomegranate, any other examples? Can you give some examples for gatonogamy? For autogamy I gave like oxalis, viola, Comelina. Like can you give few examples for gatonogamy? Okay, so these are the three kinds of pollination: autogamy, gatonogamy, and xenogamy. All right, so gatonogamy, pomegranate you can take. Now, you can take difference between the self-pollination and cross-pollination. So, self-pollination and also here, datinogamy, cucurbita you can take. The best example you can take, cucurbita, that also which comes under pomegranate, cucurbita. These are the classical examples that you can take for datinogamy, where you could see the flowers are different but present at the same plant. So, this basic understanding is very, very important. Autogamy, datinogamy, xenogamy. What is autogamy? Same plant, same flower. Datinogamy, where you could see same plant, different flower. What is xenogamy? Different flower, different plant. So this is the three basic concept that you should recollect. So now we see the difference between the self-pollination and cross-pollination. Self-pollination and cross-pollination. Self-pollination, you know what is self-pollination? It's autogamy we're talking about, autogamy and datinogamy. The first you could see where you could see it is a transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of the same flower or another flower born on the same plant. It may be the same flower or different flower, but the rule says it must be in the same plant. It should be born on the same plant. That is self-pollination. But cross-pollination, pollen grains from anther to the flower of the stigma of the another flower may be the different plant of the same species. That is very important. It may not be like different species. It should be of same species. That's what I told you before itself. You take its Rosa sinensis means it must be the Rosa sinensis. If we take the hibiscus means it must be like hibiscus. So same species, that is the rule. Even there's no problem like a different plants, but it should be of the same species. Now, where in self-pollination, it does not require any external agency. External agency, it's not required. We discussed already like cleistogamous, chasmogamous, because already anther and the stigma, all these two structures are in the close proximity, so that it doesn't require any agents, that an external agents which is required to transfer or to deposit the pollen grains onto the surface of the stigma. This is the case of self-pollination. This is assured fertilization is going to take place. Why? The reason, because the pollen grains is always very close to what? Very close to the female, the stigma. So it does not require any external agency, maybe an insect, maybe you take any external agency. But cross-pollination, since the male and the female flower, it's like, miles away, like, many kilometers away, right? Where it's not in the close proximity, where definitely it requires maybe a wind, maybe a water, maybe an insect, maybe biotic or abiotic factors. It's always required in this particular case actually. So, okay, fine. Now, both anther and stigma mature at the same time. So you cannot take it as a granted. We cannot self-pollination. Anther and stigma no. Both anther and stigma both should mature at the same time. That is what very important. If anther is maturing at one particular time and stigma is not matured, it's of no use. I hope you guys can understand. So self-pollination, if the agents is not required, if I say, it means the anther and the stigma, male and female, both should mature at the same time. Then this rule applies, where the self-pollination, then it doesn't require any external agency. Just imagine like, where you could see the anther is maturing at a one particular time, stigma is not yet matured, then definitely self-pollination will not accomplish. It's a failure. Okay. So both anther and stigma, which is supposed to mature at the same time. Due to some reasons, if this process is not occurring, then self-pollination is a big question mark, right? Anthers and stigma, here it matured at a different instance. Definitely it's matured at a different time, at various different times, and definitely it looked for external agency to transfer of the pollen grains. It can occur even when the flower is closed. That's what I told you in the cleistogamous. In the cleistogamous, even the flower is a closed fashion. I told you in cleistogamous, this self-pollination. Why? Because the anther is already there inside. So it doesn't require any pollen grains which should come from outside. Even if the flower is closed fashion also, this self-pollination gland takes place. Cross-pollination, it occurs only when the flower is open. So because the flower should open, only if the flower bloom, then only what happens, the stigma can be exposed or protrude outside. Then only the external agency, maybe a wind or water or an insect, which can come and deposit the pollen grains onto the surface of the stigma. So here the rule is the flower should open, right? In case of it means it's a chasmogamous one. It's you can cleistogamous flowers which cannot come to the cross pollination. But cleistogamous is a closed flower where assured self pollination can take place in this case. In this case, yeah, there's a waste of pollen grains in the cross pollination. So most of the times, like that is the reason where you could see the cross pollination, like you could see the pine forest and all, like more number of pollen grains, like the chance of the pollen grains to go and visit the particular to land on the stigma is actually like very less actually. So that is the reason where you could see in the sulfur clouds, we call it as in pine forest, where the majority of like millions and millions of pollen grains are getting produced, and majority of the pollen grains also getting wasted up, where in case of cross pollination. But self pollination is not like that. So how much ever the pollen grains is being produced, like it's getting utilized by the female. But in the cross pollination, as you said, like the cross pollination where the pollen grains, like the chance of getting wasted, right? So here it produces homozygous offsprings, all the same. What the nature of the parent, the same kind of the nature only, like the offsprings also can be produced. But in case of cross pollination, you can expect heterozygous, different varieties, like because we're not sure, like from which particular insect, from what type of pollen grains is getting transferred. Definitely it might be of the same species, but right, but you can see the variations over there. So here you could see heterozygous offsprings in case of cross pollination, and because it is heterozygous, the variations are coming. Fragrance also will be more in case of cross pollination when compared to the self pollination. Cross pollination have good aroma, got good fragrance, the scent, like, and also like the color. The flowers will be highly colorful, and also like it will be having good fragrance in case of cross pollination, and does not introduce any variation, since like same pollen grain, same stigma, like an assured set of fertilization is going to take place. You cannot expect much of variations in this case. Same thing. Some one point of time, this may leads to inbreeding depression also. We studied already. It's the same thing, like we discussed in biotechnology also, where we discussed where like breeding which occurs of same species, like more than 4 to 6 generations. Sometimes what happens? It leads to inbreeding depression because there's no variation. Here also in self pollination, it does not introduce any variation, since there's no variations. This may even take the particular flower or plant to a inbreeding depression also. Cross pollination, this introduced variation because different pollen grains are coming, more of variations, more of different genes, like different setup, right? So this definitely, it's a heterozygous condition, and it introduced variation. It's introduced variation. Okay, and this is how. So it produces more fragrance. Why it produces a fragrance? And also it attracts the insects. So it attracts the insects to come and collect the nectar. So one is the color, other one is the fragrance. These two are the important factors where this type of flowers, like which goes with the cross pollination, this attract the flowers to come and collect the nectar. So this is a kind of adaptation where the cross pollination is successfully accomplished. Very shortly, we're going to discuss about the difference between the wind pollination and the insect pollination. Most of the wind pollinated flowers, where you could see it will be very dull colored flower, like maize or rice. In this case, like where you could see anemophilous flowers, usually which is of dull color, the wind pollination. But when you see the entomophilous, like insect pollinated flowers, which are of like brightly colored and good fragrant flowers also. So that we're going to discuss very shortly. So this tabular column, which tells you, represents the difference between the self pollination and the cross pollination. So, and viability is seed, or the seed viability. The seed viability is more in the cross pollination. That is also the important factor that is not there. Thanks for the information that you have shared, Lata. Viability. So because it has to travel like many miles from one particular area to the other place, like definitely the pollen grains viability is also more in case of cross pollination. Then only it can survive. It can survive because it need to transfer. It need to travel all the way from particular place to the destination, right? So the viability, definitely it will be more in case of cross pollination. So self pollination and cross pollination difference we have studied. So adaptations of the self pollination. Now, when you talk about the self pollination, there are certain adaptations. The plant should have a type of adaptations. Then it will be possible for the plants to go with this type of self pollination. First is homogamy. Homogamy you take where male and female flowers mature at the same time. This is the first rule that we can take it as like homogamy. Homogamy, where you could see where both male and female both which matured at the same time. So this you could see. So if male and female flowers, even though which present at the close proximity, but it's maturing at a different time, then it's of no use, right? Then definitely it will not go with the self-pollination. It will take to the cross-pollination. But the rule says the male and female flowers which should mature at the same time, then this is called as homogamy. This is the first adaptation of self-pollination. The second one is called as cleistogamous. Cleistogamous that we already discussed, it's a closed flower. What is a cleistogamous? Closed flower. Example, it's a self-pollination. Where it's always a flower, it's in the closed stage. It will not bloom, right? So examples for cleistogamous flowers, oxalis, viola, and commelina. So this we already discussed. Geocarpy. So what is geocarpy? So coming to the geocarpy, where you could see, this you could see in case of Arachis hypogaea. What is Arachis hypogaea? Arachis hypogaea that you could see in case of groundnut. Groundnut is an example where you could see in geocarpy. What is geocarpy? Where you could see in this case where the pedicel, which that is actually, you could see the female part. The female part will slightly bend over to the ground actually. For example, this is how the female flower. The female flower which slightly bends over. If this is the female flower will slightly bend over towards the ground surface. Where here, for example, to the ground, here the male is present, the male flower is present. The female flower is actually like, away from the ground. So what happens in case of geocarpy at the time of pollination, since the male and female are in different locations, so what the female flower will do, the female flower will slightly, the pedicel, the female flower, right, the pedicel will slightly bend over toward the ground. So this is a quite interesting character, the feature that you could see in case of geocarpy. Once the fertilization is successful, again the female flower comes back to the erect phase, the same old phase. So this is, we call it as a geocarpy, where the classical example in case of groundnut, that is in Arachis hypogaea, where the pedicel of the female part, it's bent over towards the ground, and where it meets the male, and what happens, the fertilization takes place. Once the fertilization is successful, again the female part which comes back to its own position. So this process we call it as geocarpy. You could see in case of Arachis hypogaea, this is a one kind of like adaptation. If this is not bending over, this geocarpy is not happening, the fertilization will not take place. Why? Because male is in different location, female is in different location, right? So only if the geocarpy occurs where the fertilization, that means the pollination will be successful in case of groundnut, where you could see then Arachis hypogaea. This is one of the important features that you could see. Okay, fine. Next is mirabilis jalpa. Mirabilis jalpa, where you could see, like, what is mirabilis jalpa? What is the common name for mirabilis jalpa? Here, the anther bends on the stigma. So, for example, the stigma is here. This is where the stigma is here. What happens? The anther will bend. If the anther is present over here, the stigma is here. Here is the stigma. Here it is the anther. The anther will bend over towards the stigma. So here the anther is coming close. So the stigma is not doing anything. What is happening here? The anther is bending towards what? Bending towards the stigma. So to accomplish the pollination in case of mirabilis jalpa, 4 o'clock plant, exactly. In 4 o'clock plant, in mirabilis jalpa, where you could see the anther is bending towards the stigma. But anyhow, like, the pollination to happen. So this is a type of adaptation. How in case of like a groundnut, where the ovary started bending towards the ground to fulfill the pollination, the same way where you could see in mirabilis jalpa, where the anther will start bending towards the female, the stigma. Once the pollination is successful, the anther will come back to its form. Getting what I'm trying to say? So this is a kind of adaptation where you could see in mirabilis jalpa. Then you could see vinca rosea. You would have seen like the pink color flowers on the roadsides and the white flowers. You would have seen this vinca rosea, right? You would have done the practicals also with this, the pollen tube germination, the vinca rosea, where the style moved towards the anther. So what is happening in this case, the vinca rosea, the style is moving towards the anther. Here, the male is not doing anything, but the female part is moving towards the anther, right? So pollination is getting successful because Where you could see in Vinca rosea, where Vinca rosea, the male will be somewhere here, the female is somewhere here. So where the style of the female has to bend towards the male, only then the pollination can take. So because where you could see in Vinca rosea, male flower will be very shorter. So male cannot bend. So only the female supposed to take an initiative. So the female will slightly bend over to the male, so the pollination can take place, fertilization can take place. So this type of adaptation, either male or female, some kind of sort of understanding should be there between the male and female for that fertilization can take place. Then you could see in case of Solanum tuberosum, in case of potato plants, like where you could see where the stigma is coiling around, where you could see the anther here, this is the anther, the male part. Here the stigma will be coiled, actually will be coiling, which will be having the coil like structures. It just bend over, it's not slightly bending, it just coil onto the surface of the anther. This type of adaptation where you could see in case of Solanum tuberosum. So objectively, like what is the main objective on the whole? Somehow, the self pollination to be successful. It may be like geocarpy or Miraculous jalpa, Vinca rosea, or you take like Solanum tuberosum, anything that you take, somehow the male and female supposed to meet each other. When this problem comes, when the male and female is at the different locations, they're supposed to try to come closer. If pollination is successful, the fertilization also will be succeeded. So it won't require any external agency to bring the pollen grains. So this is the type of adaptation, some examples that I have given. Okay, then self-pollination adaptation. This is what actually we're discussing, the self-pollination. Okay, so as Rubina, you said the loss viability in 30 minutes according to the, yes, actually it varies. Actually it won't be all the time. There are few exceptions where you could see there are places where you could see pollen grains which can even withstand even many months also. There are exceptions where the pollen grains can withstand, but majority of the pollen grains which will be viable for Anemophilous pollen grains and all, the viability is for just 30 minutes. But there are exceptions where the pollen grains even which can withstand even months also. Okay, so self-pollination. Here you could see examples where you could see the self-pollination, where you could see the pea plant. Just now we discussed Arachis hypogaea, the geocarpy. I told you now geocarpy, right? In case of groundnut, the groundnut plants, you could see in case of barley. These are some of the examples that you could see. There you could see autogamy or the gaetonogamy. Autogamy means same plant, same flower. Gaetonogamy, where you could see the same plant but different flower. So both which comes under the self-pollination. Examples like barley, groundnut and pea plant that you can take. Okay. Now we can take the self-pollination, homogamy, cleistogamy that we already discussed. Just now I told you Mirabilis jalpa. This is of the Mirabilis jalpa. I told you 4 o'clock plant. The Mirabilis jalpa. I told you this will be a pink color or white flower also. Vinca rosea. So Vinca rosea, Mirabilis jalpa. I could say Violacea family. And you could see balsam plants where you could see this type of self-pollination is promoted by certain floral adaptation. I told you maybe the anther which gets coiled onto the female bend onto the surface of the male, vice versa condition takes place. But eventually what should happen, the pollination should be successful so that fertilization can take place. So it's all understanding between the male and the female, plus sometimes the male might be a shorter, sometimes the female might be the shorter, some might be the male and female may not be in the close proximity, it may be away from the particular region. So this type of adaptation is quite necessary so that self-pollination can be achieved. So homogamy I already told you, where it refers to maturation of 6 organs at the same time. It means anther and stigma both should mature at the same time, then it is called as homogamy. Definitely at one point of time the anther is maturing a different time, the female, the stigma is maturing at again a different time, then definitely self-pollination will not work out, then it will go to the cross-pollination. Cleistogamy I told you, in which the flowers do not open, it will not open at all at the time of fertilization. So this we call it as cleistogamy. This we already discussed. Coming to the cross-pollination. So we're done with the first part, that is self-pollination. Now to move on to the cross-pollination. So coming to the cross-pollination, gaetonogamy comes under the cross-pollination. No. So gaetonogamy, which is the part of the self-pollination itself. There are certain exceptions alone where the gatonogamy, there are chances. You can ask me the question, sir, if you say like gatonogamy which comes under self-pollination, where the flowers are different, but if the male and female is not maturing at the same time, maybe the chances for the gatonogamy where some other pollen grain which can come and deposit onto this particular flower, where there are chance few exceptions where you could see the gatonogamy can get inside the cross pollination, but mostly majority of the cases gatonogamy where it comes under the self pollination, whereas the xenogamy which comes under the cross pollination. Okay, so coming to the adaptation of the cross pollinated flower. Coming to the cross pollination, first is sterility, self sterility, where you could see pollen not grow or grow very slowly. This is where the problem comes, where it comes to cross pollination. So far we discussed in self pollination, anther and stigma both started maturing at the same time, no problem at all. But if it's not started maturing, it's not matching now, like pollen started, it's not growing or it's growing very slowly, whereas perhaps the female started growing very faster. Female சீக்கிரமா வளர்ந்துருச்சு, மேல் பார்ட் வந்து ரொம்ப ஸ்லோவா வளர்ந்துட்டு இருக்கு. That is the place where the definitely what will happen actually. It cannot wait for a long time for the pollen grains to be produced, for anther to get produce a pollen grain. So pollen not grow or it's growing very slowly, then there will be incompatibility. Compatibility means what? Compatibility means matching. Incompatibility means it's not matching. It's not matching between what? The male and the female, the anther and the stigma. These two things are maturing at the different times, so there's no matching in between. Definitely the flower will be in a position, the stigma will be in a position to receive the pollen grains from external agency. So this is the first condition where this is called a self sterility. Even though the male and female present in the same flower also, where the anther is not growing or it's growing very slowly, where this condition we call it as self incompatibility, where the female will be forced to take the pollen grains from the external agency. So this is called as self sterility. Dichogamy, second adaptation. Guys, we are discussing about cross pollination adaptation. Now dichogamy you take, dichogamy where the different types of maturation we take. It may be called as protandrous or protogynous. What is protandrous and what is protogynous? Protandrous you take, right? Protandrous where the male matures first. You can ask me, sir, what happens like if the male matures first? What happens if the female matures first? Like the time factors are different, but the term we give, that male is in the flower, the male is maturing, the anther is maturing first, right? Where you could see it's a protandrous where the male is maturing first. Where in case of protogynous, the female is maturing first. Example for protandrous, you can take an example, cotton, lady's finger, that is ochra, salvia, helianthus. These are the common examples for protandrous. Sometimes they'll ask a question, example for protandrous, where what is protandrous? In a flower where both male and female is present, but this is supposed to go with a cross pollination. Why? Because male is matured first, the female has not yet matured. But what happens in this case? Like this usually occurs in case of cotton, ochra, salvia, helianthus. In these cases where the male matures first, and then after that, after some point of time only, the female will started maturing. Okay, Okay. Then protogynous, the female matures first. Example you take in custard apple and mirabilis jalpa, that is 4 o'clock plant, where you could see the female which matures first. This we call it as protogynous. Heterostyly, what is heterostyly? Heterostyly means the length of the style is different actually. Sometimes the female part, the style is very short, sometimes the style is very long, right? The style, length of the style which keeps varying from one flower to the other flower, this we call it as like pin and a thumb actually. Pin and thumb where the length which seems to be shorter, and other cases where you could see the style which seems to be lengthy, a longer one. So if the style is lengthy, what happens? Maybe the male flower which is very short, the male is very short, since the style is very big, what happens the female which is protruding out, whereas the male is deep inside. So the chance of pollination also which will be delayed, where pollen grains which is getting produced by the anther, the male part will not be get used up by the female. Why? Because the style is like, the length of the style is actually keep varying, so which cannot meet the pollen grains. And definitely this type of particular flowers which need to go with the cross pollination, where the style is actually comparatively, the length of the style is a different. Then prepotency. Prepotency is pollen from the other plant germinate first. What happens, like, the plant germinate the pollen, if not it will give to the pollen of the same plant. So what happens, the prepotency, where what happens, like, the chance is given to the pollen grain of the same plant. Usually what happens, it will be giving an opportunity for the external agency, that is like, other pollen grains which is coming to the external source. If that is not actually working out, then the chance will be given to the pollen grains of the same plant. This is a quite interesting part where you could see in prepotency, right? Where what happens, if the pollen grains is actually delaying, the same male flower is delaying in producing the pollen grain, the chance will be given to the external agency, to the external mode, by means of air or by means of insects. Even that pollen grains is not also working out, then again, like, this give the chance to the pollen grain of the same plant itself. This we call it as prepotency. This we call it as a prepotency. Okay. Now we come to the self-incompatibility. Self-incompatibility, the chance will not be utilized by the pollen grain. Now, what's interesting factor in self-incompatibility? Here, the stigma is giving an opportunity for the pollen grain of the same flower itself. But even though what happens, the pollen grain is not making use of this opportunity, then definitely this will come to the self-incompatibility. So the female will keep on waiting for one particular time for the pollen grains to be produced, because it does not, they don't want to receive the pollen grains from the external agency. Even after that, the pollen grains is not making use of the opportunity given by the stigma, the female part, then it will be forced to take the pollen grains to the external agency. Example, you can take in case of tobacco, or you can take in case of potato. This type of self-incompatibility takes place. Ergogamy. Ergogamy, what happens? The physical barriers avoid the self-pollination. Physical barriers, example, you take in a polonium. Polonium, where you could see the bag-like structure. You could see the bag-like structure will be very bulky actually. All the pollen grains will be in a bag-like structure. This we could see in case of calotropis. The calotropis, where you could see in case of polonium. You could see in case of polonium, the bag-like structures. It will be very heavy. It will be very heavy. The polonium, where you could see the barrier. Only if the bag burst, what happens? The bag which is getting bursted, then only the pollen grains which started coming out of the bag, that is a polonium-like structure. This you could see in case of calotropis, where this pollen grains are actually mascot, like, completely covered by means of a bag-like structure. Once the pressure, like, if like in any birds which is coming and sitting, it does the pollen grains, where the polonium which just fall onto the surface of the stigma, where with that pressure, what happens? The bag, the polonium bursts, then inside the bag, what is present? The pollen grains are present. Now the pollen grains will burst out. So this type of barriers. So here also it should have an adaptation. If the bag didn't burst, then what happens? The pollen grain will not come outside, then the fertilization will not take place, because the pollen grains does not come outside. So here also, like, a heavy bag-like structures in calotropis, which face a difficulty where the physical barrier, that is in case of ergogamy, where the bag-like structures are supposed to burst out, only then the pollen grains can come outside. So these are the few adaptations that you can see in case of cross-pollination. So we're done with this part. Now we come to the full part of the cross-pollination. It involves the transfers of the pollen grains from the anther to stigma of another flower of a different plant. This we call it as xenogamy. This is already we discussed. So xenogamy, the pollination between the flowers of the different genetic constitution, I told you already. In cross-pollination, it is heterozygous, and also which allows variation. There will be more of variation that you could see in this particular case. Examples you can take for cross-pollination: sunflower, date palm, maize, etc. Then you could see cross-pollination is favored by certain adaptations, where you could see the declining. Declining, where you could see the plants bearing unisexual flowers possess only one kind of sex organs. There you could see, like in a case of like papaya, where you could see papaya where male flowers are separate, the plant is also like separated. In this case, definitely it should go only with the cross pollination, because male is somewhere else, like female is somewhere. There's no meeting point of this male and female. Definitely for this type of plants or the flower, which requires like external agency by means of like insect or water or some other biotic area, biotic components to accomplish a cross pollination. Example, you take papaya, mulberry. These are the examples where you could see in case of cross pollination. Okay, so now, as of now, we're done with the fertilization, pollination. The pollination part, that is at the before fertilization, the pollination takes place, where successfully the male has deposited, the male deposited the pollen grains on the surface of the stigma. What's going to take place? Fertilization is going to take place. So now the fertilization is going to take place in this case. Fine. So it's Nepenthes, you could see insect pollination. It's buffering. It's okay now. Is it clear now? Is it clear? Okay, fine. Nepenthes is usually by insect pollination. So even though it's a nitrogen deficient soil, the insectivorous plants which grows where the plants are getting like pollinated by means of, but the reason is like insect which acts like a prey, but still the pollination is also going to take place by means of insect only. It's like by means of entomophily, insectivorous plants, right? So we're done with the pollination. Now we move on to the double fertilization. Coming to the double fertilization, we discussed in the last part where you could see the embryo part. We discussed the last part, then the first part of the sexual reproduction of flowering plants. We discussed about 7-cell 8-nucleate stage that we discussed, especially in case of megasporogenesis. The megasporogenesis, where you could see 4 megaspores are produced at the end of megasporogenesis, where out of 4, 3 started degenerating, and only one will be functional, and this only one, the one megaspore which move on to the again like mitotic division. This leads to the 7-cell 8-nucleate stage, and this development is called as monosporic development. This development we call it as monosporic. The reason, from one megaspore, how successfully it leads to the 7-cell 8-nucleate stage, where this development took place from the one megaspore, because only one is functional, right, in megasporogenesis. So this development is called as monosporic development, that is 7-cell 8-nucleate stage. I hope you can recollect the first part that we already discussed, why we call it a 7-cell 8-nucleate stage. When you start counting the cells, where you could see, right, you could see chalazal end. The top is the chalazal end, and this is the micropylar end, because we studied already of the types of ovule. That part also we discussed. So chalazal end, and this is the micropylar end, and here you could see the antipodal, 3 antipodals over here. So 3 antipodal. And you could see here 2 synergids here, 2 synergids, and this is the egg cell. Egg cell plus synergid together we call it as egg apparatus. This we call it as egg apparatus. Synergids and egg together we call it as egg apparatus. And central part we call it as a polar nuclei. This polar nuclei is fused together which forms one cell, but this consists of 2 nucleus inside. So now we come to the double fertilization. We discussed already 2 fertilization is going to take place in this case. Once the pollen tube will started forming, this we already discussed, guys. I'm just giving the recap. The pollen tube receives 2 male gametes. What will be the fate of these 2 male gametes? One male gamete will be received and get fused with the egg cell, and this forms a zygote. The other male gamete which is coming forward, and this go and fuse with the polar nuclei. And this one will form the egg plus the male gamete will form a zygote, and one we got fused with the polar nuclei which will form a endosperm. And in the same embryo sac, you could see 2 fertilization takes place. One fertilization with the one male gamete which got fused with the egg cell, right? This formed the zygote. This is fertilization 1. Second fertilization, another male gamete which gone through and again fused with the polar nuclei, where this formed endosperm. So the same embryo sac, 2 fertilization took place, so we call it as double fertilization. So here this is zygote formation, this is the endosperm formation, and already told you First, the endosperm which multiplies, faster, because the reason is the endosperm which acts like a nutritive medium. So this provides the necessary nutrition for a developing zygote. So the zygote will be in a paused mode for some point of time. It will be paused. Then the endosperm which keeps on rapidly developing. So the endosperm which provides like complete nutrition for a developing zygote. Now the zygote will become embryo. But the ploidy that you should remember where, in case of endosperm, the ploidy is 3n, because already two nucleus that you could see inside. This is 2n. This 2n plus n, that is a male gamete, where the ploidy is 3n for the endosperm. Whereas you could see in the egg cell, there is egg, where it was egg plus 1 male gamete. Here 2n. So here it could say 2n, that is diploid, the zygote. So endosperm ploidy is 3n and zygote ploidy is 2n. This is only in case of angiosperms, but in gymnosperms, where you could see endosperm, the ploidy is n. That you should remember always. Sometimes that was the question and they'll ask you, in case of gymnosperms, the ploidy that you could see in case of gymnosperm, it is haploid n. But in case of angiosperms, the flowering plants, where you could see the endosperm, the ploidy is 3n, because already two polar nuclei which got fused with the one male gametes. So 3n. So the ploidy is 3n for angiosperms, the flowering plants. So the fertilization took place in the two locations in the embryo sac. One in case of egg, here in the egg cell. The other one in case of here in a polar nuclei, that is primary endosperm nucleus, we call it as PEN, we call it as primary endosperm nucleus, and this will form a endosperm. This eventually we call it as double fertilization. So this is how actually the pollen tubes which comes towards the micropylon end, and this pass to the synergids, and then what happens? It gets fused with what? Which get fused with the one get fused with the egg cell, the other one will get fused with the polar nuclei. Okay, fine. So we're done with this part. Okay, we come to that part when we discussed about the embryo development. We come to the ostoria. Okay, now we discuss continuation of wind pollination. So this part that we should be, this area you get a question, adaptation of wind pollinated flowers, where you could see like the wind pollination. It is inconspicuous flowers and versatile anthers. This is one important feature that you could see in the adaptation of like Anemophily, that is wind pollination. That is like, it cannot be clearly visible actually, like it is inconspicuous, it may not be clearly visible. So it is inconspicuous, maybe the insects may not come and approach this type of flowers because it's not clearly visible, right? So it seems to be inconspicuous flowers, and it's having the versatile anther. This is one adaptation. Pollen grains are smooth-walled, lightweight, and small and dry. That is why, like, the wind pollination, it will be easy for the air to carry, like, we transfer the pollen grains to the wind. It should be like, smooth-walled, lightweight. It is of like heavy, then definitely, like, the pollen grains cannot be travel across to the air. So it must be the lightweight. It should be very small, and it should be like dry. Only then the pollen grains which can travel to a larger distance, then produce the larger quantities. That is what actually, like, in wind pollination, because you need to travel from one particular destination area to the destination, where this has to be produced in the large numbers. Then stigma, where you could see the stigma should be the large, and it should be coming out. It should be like, protruding means what? It should come out. So protruding, branched and feathery. So only if it is a branched, only if it is feathery, sometimes it is sticky, then only what happens, like, how much ever like the pollen grains which is carrying forward through the wind, this can be come and deposited away onto the surface of the stigma. So it should be having a branch, it should be having a feathery. Only if having this type of adaptations, the pollen grains which come and sit or land onto the stigma. So this type of adaptation should be there for the stigma. In case of the maize plants, you could see the maize plants where it goes like approximately 120 centimeter where this can grow. Where you could see in case of like, the mature part, the male flower head that you could see, and the female part that you could see. The female, this is a female flower head, and this is the male flower head, where the cobs and tassel inflorescence that you could see in case of the maize plants. Actually, this is a specific the type of inflorescence where you could, this inflorescence we call it as corbs and tassel. Corbs and tassel, this you could see in case of the maize plants, especially in case of wind pollination. So we're done with this part, anemophily. Now come to the hydrophily. The next part, the hydrophily, that is water pollination. So the water pollination also, definitely the pollination takes place in water, where you can see the hypohydrophily. There are two types of hydrophily, water pollination, that is hypohydrophily and epihydrophily. So first we discuss about hypohydrophily. Hypohydrophily, where you could see the submerged rooted. Hypo means submerged rooted inside, where the pollination is going to take place. Epihydrophily means on the surface of the water where the pollination generally takes place. We're going to discuss with an example now, where you could see now hypohydrophily, submerged. These plants are submerged, where you could see the needle-like leaves. So what is the type of adaptation that you could see? Needle-like leaves. The leaves will be thorn-like, will be having a needle-like structure, but this is without exile. This point that you should remember. This without exile, and the pollen has a specific gravity. So since it has got a specific gravity, this has got the resistance to the water current, which makes the pollen grains to make it upright. So example you could take, for example, hypohydrophily, Ceratophyllum zoostra. Ceratophyllum zoostra, which is the longest pollen grains, the zoostera, this particular plant which produces the pollen grains, that is zoostera, that is the longest pollen grain. Okay, the longest pollen grains which produced by the zoostra. Okay, so where you can see the dehiscence of the pollen grains germinates on the surface of the water. The pollen grain sinks and fertilization occurs. And this is an interesting feature you could see. The pollen grains which is floating on the surface of the water. For example, you could see this is a ceratophyllum. This is ceratophyllum plant, and this one you could take zoostera plant, right? So where, what is the type of the pollination where you could see both are submerged that you could see. But what is happening here in this case, where the pollen grain sinks. So pollen grains which floats, but one point of time what will happen? It has got a specific gravity where the pollen grains which sinks inside, and then what happens? The fertilization which occurs inside. This point that you should remember. The pollen grains sinks and the fertilization which occurs inside, where in case of hypohydrophily, in case of ceratophyllum, and in case of zoostera. Sometimes they ask you a question, identify an example for hypohydrophily or epihydrophily. So example for hypohydrophily is ceratophyllum and zoostera. Even though the pollen grains which floats, what happens? The pollen grains which sinks inside the water, and then the fertilization which occurs inside the water, especially in case of zoostera, and you could see in case of ceratophyllum. Coming to epihydrophily. Epihydrophily, where the pollination which occurs, that is why the reason we call it as epi means what? Surface. On the surface of the water. Example, you take Vallisneria. Vallisneria is a classical example where the pollination which occurs at the surface of the water. But here it is dioecious. But the previous part that we discussed is a monoecious part, where you could see the monoecious part where we discussed the male and female which present in the same part. But in dioecious, where you could see like male and female is separate, the staminate and the pistillate flowers are separated here. So the pollination occurs at the surface of the water. So we call this as epihydrophily. We call it as epihydrophily, where male flowers break away and float on the surface of the water. Now what happens? The male flower, you could see the male flowers which break away and which floats on the surface of the water. Can you see the male flowers here, right? This is a male flower which floats on the surface of the water. But the female, what is the type of adaptation that you could see in case of Vallisneria? The female have a long spiral stalk-like structure. Can you see the stalk, the coil-like structure here? This is a stalk-like structure that you could see. This was actually which is completely submerged. But the time of the fertilization, what happens? This will arise and this will come up to the surface of the water to collect the pollen grains. Now the pollen grains is on the surface of the water. At the time of the dehiscence of the male, the pollen grain, then what happens? The female will be will be rising from the down and will be coming to the surface, and this will collect what? Which will be collecting the male part, where the pollination which takes place on the surface of the water, and then what happens? The pollination takes surface of the water and it collects the pollen grains, and again once again it comes back to its normal position. It comes inside. Then fertilization takes place. inside. So this point you should remember, epihydrophily, where the pollination which took place on the surface of the water, fertilization which takes place inside the water. Here you could see in Vallisneria, the female, the pistillate flower, have a stalk-like structure, the coil-like structure, which helps the female flower to just go up, collect the male flower. Here you could see the male flower, which collects the male flower, and once it collects, it's again it come back. Again, it come back to its own position where the fertilization takes place inside the water. So this you could see this type of adaptation you could see in case of epihydrophily. So Zostera, Ceratophyllum, Vallisneria, these are some of the examples that you should keep in your mind. Where in water pollination, you should understand, right, whether it is hypohydrophily or it is epihydrophily. So this is in case of Vallisneria, epihydrophily. So we're done with the air pollination and water pollination. So guys, we're done with the first part of the pollination. The next part we're going to discuss about cross pollination, that is like entomophily by insect pollination. Now it's the time for break. You take 30 minutes break. We meet after 30 minutes. Thank you.